Hello, beautiful English students. It's Miss Allie, and this is a video about the difference between active and passive voice. And so I'd like you guys to do a proper heading at the top of your document and go ahead and take notes on the definitions and the examples that we provide in this quick little prezi. So active voice indicates that the subject of the verb is acting. Because the subject does or acts upon the verb in such sentences, the sentences are said to be in the active voice. So these examples show that the subject is doing the verb's action. The dog jumped onto the boy. The dog is the subject, is doing the jumping, which is the verb. Chrissy will give a book report to the class. Chrissy, the subject, is doing the verb of giving. In a passive voice sentence, the subject and object flip-flop. The subject becomes the passive recipient of the action. So because the subject is being acted upon, it is passive. Such sentences are said to be in the passive voice. So here are some examples. The subject being acted upon by the verb. Excuse me. The boy was jumped on by the dog. The boy, the subject, was being jumped on, the verb. The book report will be given by Christy to the class. The book report will be given. It did not give, it did not present, it will be given. The paper is the subject, was eaten by the computer. So the subject was being eaten by the verb. Most writers prefer to use the active voice because it is more direct. And so you can compare, like the active voice would be the waiter dropped the tray of food versus passive, the tray of food was dropped by the waiter. And feel free to pause these as we're going through. I know I'm going through quickly, but feel free to pause these and take notes. The active voice is less awkward and clearly states the relationship between the subject and the action. So you can compare the two here. The passive would be your request for funding has been denied by the review committee, versus the active would be the review committee denied your request for funding. The active voice sentence pattern propels the reader forward through your writing, thus avoiding weak prose. In general, the passive voice is less direct, less forceful, and less concise than the active voice. Use the passive voice in the following situations. Using passive voice when you do not know or do not want to reveal the performer or of an action. Use passive voice when you want to emphasize the receiver of an action. So an awkward passive sentence, my bicycle was repaired by John. Repainted by John. And then the deliberate passive would be my bicycle was repainted. The performer did not mention did not mention that part, and the emphasis is on the bicycle, not on John. The passive voice requires a double verb and is always consisted of a form of the verb to be and the past participle. Use the ed form of another verb. So an example, John baked the bread. The bread was baked by John. That is, was is a form of the verb be. So we're putting those double verbs in there, was baked in there, and that just creates a more passive voice. Writers should be familiar with the forms of to be, often called linking verbs. It's probably something you remember from middle school or maybe even elementary, so that they can be easily identified in the passive voice in their work. Review the forms of to be, which is am, is, are, was, were, be, being, been. Note the forms of to be in the examples of the verb to kick. So is kicked, had been kicked, he was kicked, is going to be kicked, is being kicked, will be kicked, has been kicked, can be kicked, was being kicked, should be kicked. Moved to the subject position of the sentence. So the cookies were eaten by the children ate the cookies. And then again, passive, the tunnels are dug by the grapplers. Active would be they dug the tunnels. So yeah, We're not going to actually do the activity. We're just going to end it there. So go ahead and wrap up your notes. Please feel free to rewatch the video if you need to. Have a beautiful evening, guys, and I will see you tomorrow.